They sat across from each other. Richard's eyes glittered with a knowing look. "Diana, you're a bright young woman with a lot of potential. I could help you out with your mother's bills. I'll give you $1 million right now," he said, his voice rich with promise. $1 million for your mother's bills right now, he echoed again. Diana's heart skipped, her breath catching in her throat. Diana Thompson grew up in a small town, cradled by the warmth of her mother, Camila, whose love was the sun that lit her days. The absence of her father, taken from her as a child, left a void, a silence filled only by Camila's steadfast strength. Her mother, her world, raised her alone, battling the storms of life with grace, never faltering even when life's weight grew heavy. Despite their struggles, Diana, with the fire of determination glowing in her chest, studied hard, her dreams vast as the open sky. She made her way into a good university, her future shimmering ahead of her like a far-off horizon, yet life was never as simple as it seemed. In her final year, the winds of misfortune swept in once more. Camila fell gravely ill, and as the weight of medical bills began to mount, Diana found herself standing on the edge of despair. Each night, the thought of her mother's fading strength kept her awake, her heart heavy with fear. Camila had always been her rock, the one who had held her steady through every storm. Even when her father's family turned their backs on them, stripping them of most of his wealth, leaving only fragments of what was once theirs, Camila stood tall. They sold what little remained of her father's estate, property that had once been hers by right, but even that was entangled in courts, out of reach, a distant dream. And so, they had sold what they could, all to keep Camila in the prestigious hospital where her fragile life was being held together. Diana, resilient as ever, found ways to survive. She began to buy counterfeit clothes, the rough texture of Okirika or ABA-made products, a far cry from the comforts of her past, but they were necessities she couldn't afford to scorn. Food, clothes, bills, everything came from her part-time jobs. She worked at restaurants, her weekends filled with shifts. Each hour worked a drop in the ocean of her survival. The weight was heavy, but her spirit did not break. Then one day, as she walked back from class with her friend, a car, sleek, luxurious, drove past them. The glint of the sun on the Lamborghini's surface caught her eye, but what truly stole the moment was the man inside, turning back to look at her through the mirror, as though something in her essence had reached out to him. "Let me give you a ride," his voice smooth, his presence commanding as he offered. Diana hesitated, her instincts cautioning her, but her friend's gentle persuasion led her to accept. As the car hummed beneath them, the man finally introduced himself. "My name is Richard," he said, his words as smooth as silk, carried by the wind that passed through the open window. "I'm a businessman, with a chain of enterprises reaching across the world. What's your name?" "Diana," she replied, her voice calm, like the sea at dawn. Richard didn't bother with subtlety. "I find you incredibly beautiful, and I want us to be friends. No strings attached," he said, his voice full of confidence, as if the world bent to his will. "May I have your number?" Diana paused, uncertainty settling on her shoulders like a cloak. Could she trust this stranger, whose wealth shone too brightly? Her thoughts spun like a whirlwind, but she found herself handing over her number, perhaps tempted by the possibilities the world seemed to hold at that moment. Richard Harrison, the only son of the renowned Mr. Benson Harrison, was a man who had always had the world at his feet. The Harrisons were a family draped in the golden cloth of wealth and power, their influence stretching far and wide. Richard, a product of the finest schools, held both his father's legacy and his own company in his hands. Yet, for all his accomplishments, he was also a man driven by shallow desires, a chronic womanizer whose charm had led countless women into his bed, including his employees. His mother, Mrs. Harrison, though regal and composed, was troubled by her son's ways. He often stayed out late at night to avoid them, seeing them as a nuisance. But Mrs. Harrison wasn't ready to let the matter go. "When will you settle down, Richard? Just pick one, anyone. I'm tired of this endless parade," she would plead, her voice filled with motherly concern. "Oh, Mum," Richard would only groan in response, brushing her off like a leaf in the wind. Richard was charming, confident, and sure that his charm would work on Diana. "You're beautiful, my angel," he would say during their calls, his words heavy with desire. "I wish I could whisper those words to you in bed." "Please, Richard." Diana's voice sharpened, the edges of her anger cutting through. "I don't like what you're saying. You're crossing a line." "Relax, princess. I was only joking," Richard would defend, though there was a heat in his words that betrayed more than simple jest. As they ended their call, Richard frowned, thinking to himself, "I will get you no matter how hard you're playing to get." Over time, their friendship grew, though it was a delicate balance. Richard invited her to a luxurious dinner one evening, the restaurant's atmosphere thick with the scent of wealth, crystal chandeliers twinkling like stars, soft music playing in the background like a lover's whisper. Diana hesitated, but accepted. She needed to ask for help. Her mother's condition was worsening, and she had no one else to turn to. As they sat across from each other, Richard's eyes glittered with a knowing look. "Diana, you're a bright young woman with a lot of potential. I could help you out with your mother's bills. I'll give you $1 million right now," he said, his voice rich with promise. $1 million for your mother's bills right now, he echoed again. Diana's heart skipped, her breath catching in her throat. $1 million? She whispered, her disbelief palpable. Thank you so much for watching part 1 of this gripping story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel ***, and leave a comment below telling us what you learned from Diana's incredible journey. Also, be sure to check out part 2 of this story, where the drama continues.